In ancient Athens, on a busy afternoon when the agora was full and people were moving between their business and their conversations, a philosopher named Crates was walking through the city. Crates was not a quiet or invisible figure. He was one of the most recognized thinkers in Athens, a student of the Cynic school, known for giving away his considerable wealth to live in voluntary simplicity, and known even more for the quality of his mind and the steadiness of his character. People knew who he was, and on this particular afternoon, a man in the crowd recognized him too. The man stepped forward and began mocking him, publicly, loudly, in front of whoever was close enough to hear. He mocked Crates for his poverty, for his appearance, for the philosophy he had dedicated his life to. He said the things that people say when they want to see someone crack. He was specific and he was personal, and he was performing for the crowd that was beginning to gather around them. The crowd waited, because when a man of Crates' reputation is confronted publicly, the expectation is a response worthy of that reputation, a rebuttal, a dismissal, something clever that would put the man in his place and confirm what everyone already believed about this philosopher's wisdom. Crates stopped walking. He looked at the man. He took in everything being said. And then he turned and continued walking. No words, no gesture, no expression that suggested the words had found anything worth landing on inside him. Just the quiet, unhurried continuation of wherever he had been going before the interruption arrived. The man called after him. More words, louder now, because the silence had not produced the reaction he was looking for, and so he tried harder. Crates did not turn around. He did not slow down. He simply walked. The crowd dispersed. The man eventually stopped. And what remained, what every person who witnessed that moment carried with them afterward, was not the content of what had been said. Nobody remembered the specific insults. Nobody remembered the argument because there was no argument to remember. What remained was the walk, the image of a man moving through provocation the way water moves through open air, not around it, not against it, through it, as though it had no density worth resisting. That walk is the entire lesson. And everything we are going to explore together in this video grows from that single image. Because what Crates demonstrated in the agora that afternoon was not a technique or a tactic or a clever way of winning a public moment. It was the outward expression of something that had been built entirely on the inside. Something that most people spend their whole lives catching only glimpses of and never quite managing to hold. The capacity to be genuinely, completely, structurally unmoved by what does not deserve movement. That is what this video is about, not theory, not ancient philosophy kept safely at a distance from the reality of your daily life, but the honest, personal, sometimes uncomfortable examination of why you react the way you do, why you explain the way you do, why you engage with things that cost you far more than they were ever worth, and what it actually takes to stop. If this channel is new to you, subscribe to the Stoic Truth right now. Every week we come here and do this work together. Hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and let us stay with this. There is a version of you that you have probably caught glimpses of. Not the version that shows up when everything is going well and the conditions are cooperating and life is being reasonably kind. The version that shows up in the difficult moments and surprises even you with its steadiness. The moment when something that usually pulls you completely off course just does not reach the same depth it normally would. When you find yourself watching a situation with something closer to curiosity than urgency, when the pull to react is there, but it feels somehow smaller than you, somehow optional, in a way it never used to feel. Those glimpses are not accidents, they are previews. They are showing you something that already exists inside you, underneath the conditioned patterns and the automatic responses and the habits of reaction that have been running for so long, they started to feel like personality. And what this video is asking you to do over the next 40 minutes is not to acquire something new, but to examine what is already there and begin to understand what is covering it. Because here is the truth that most people never sit with long enough to genuinely feel. The reactions that define how you move through the world, the automatic responses that fire before you have a chance to decide whether you want them to, the patterns that have been running so reliably and for so long that they have started to feel like just who you are. Almost none of those are actually decisions. They feel like decisions. In the moment, they can feel absolutely justified, completely reasonable, even morally necessary. But there is an enormous difference between a reaction that is justified and a reaction that is decided. And if it is not decided, if it simply fires the moment the right conditions appear, then regardless of how reasonable it feels in the moment, it is not fully yours. It belongs to the pattern, and the pattern does not answer to you, you answer to it. This is not a comfortable thing to sit with. Most people, when you suggest that their most strongly felt reactions might not be genuine choices, push back immediately, because reactions feel so real. They feel so personally true. The anger that rises when you are treated unfairly feels like an honest expression of who you are. The urgency to defend yourself when you are misrepresented feels like integrity. The need to respond, to correct, to engage, to make sure your perspective is heard, all of that feels like self-respect. And sometimes it is. Sometimes a genuine decision is being made, and it looks exactly like those things. But the Stoics were insistent, with a precision that was almost clinical, on the importance of knowing the difference, of being able to look at what is happening inside you in a given moment and ask honestly, is this a choice, or is this a habit wearing the costume of a choice? Because that question, asked seriously and answered honestly, is where everything begins to change. Epictetus, who had been born a slave and built an entire philosophy of inner freedom from inside the most constrained external circumstances imaginable, said something that cuts straight to the center of all of this. He said that no man is free who is not master of himself, not master of his circumstances, not master of other people's behavior or the world's tendency to be difficult and unpredictable and frequently unfair. Master of himself. And the path to that mastery, in his teaching, was not a matter of developing more willpower or forcing yourself to be calm in moments when you are not. It was a matter of understanding what actually belongs to you and what does not. Understanding where your genuine power lies and where you have been spending energy on things that were never yours to influence. Because once you understand that clearly, really feel it, rather than just intellectually acknowledging it, the behavior changes naturally, not through effort, through clarity. What actually belongs to you is a much smaller territory than most people are living in. Your own thoughts, the quality of your attention, the choices you make about how to engage with what happens to you. the principles you decide to live by, and the consistency with which you return to them when life tests whether you mean them. That is yours, completely and entirely. No one can reach inside that territory without your permission. What does not belong to you is everything outside that boundary, what other people say about you, what they believe about you, how they interpret your words and your actions, whether the world arranges itself in a way that confirms your expectations or violates them. The behavior of people who are operating from their own patterns, their own conditioning, their own wounds and needs and projections, which are entirely theirs and which have very little to do with you even when they are aimed directly at you. Most people are living as though that second category belongs to them too, as though what other people think is a problem they are responsible for solving, as though being misunderstood is something they should be correcting, as though every action directed at them requires a response that completes the circuit. And in living that way, they are spending the majority of their available energy in territory that was never theirs to govern. The man who mocked Crates in the Agora was operating from that second category entirely. His behavior was his behavior. His opinion was his opinion. It lived inside him, shaped by his own experience and his own need to diminish something he perhaps did not fully understand. None of that was Crates. None of it described Crates accurately or added anything true to the world. And so Crates' response, the walk, was not a strategy designed to look dignified. It was the honest expression of a man who had examined the boundary between his territory and everything else, and understood it clearly enough that stepping into someone else's drama to manage their perception of him simply did not feel like a task that belonged on his list. That is a level of clarity about one's own territory that takes time to build. It is not something you decide to have and then have. It is something you practice. And the practice begins with the smallest possible version of it, which is the pause. The pause is not a technique in the self-help sense of the word. It is not a hack or a trick you apply to a situation. It is the moment, however brief, in which you become aware that a reaction is beginning before it has fully taken over. That moment of awareness, even 1 second before the habitual response fires, creates something that did not exist before. It creates distance. Not physical distance, psychological distance, a small gap between you and the reaction. And in that gap, there is something extraordinarily valuable. There is a question. Do I want to do this? That question sounds simple. It is not. Because answering it honestly requires you to look at what the reaction is actually doing, what it is serving, where it is pointing, whether following it leads anywhere you genuinely want to go. And in most moments of genuine provocation, when you ask that question with real honesty, the answer is not what the reaction was insisting it was. Most reactions, examined clearly, do not resolve anything. They extend things. They give weight to situations that without the fuel of engagement would have lost significance quickly. They confirm to the person provoking you that access exists, that the right words in the right place can shift your state, can change your behavior, can make you do things you would not otherwise have chosen to do. And once that confirmation exists, it gets stored, used again, refined over time into something increasingly precise at reaching you. But when the reaction does not come, when the provocation meets stillness rather than response, something entirely different happens. The loop, which requires your participation to continue, simply does not run. And a loop that cannot run cannot escalate, cannot expand, cannot grow from something small into something that occupies your thoughts for hours or days after the original moment has long since passed. This is worth sitting with because it is the opposite of what most people believe about the relationship between silence and situations. Most people believe that not responding allows a situation to define itself in your absence. That silence implies acceptance. That if you do not correct something, it stands uncorrected. But that is only true in situations where your response was what was keeping the record straight to begin with. In the majority of provocations, in the majority of moments where someone says something that was designed to produce a reaction, your response does not clarify anything. It only confirms that the action had the desired effect. And that confirmation is all that was ever being sought. Silence, real silence, the kind that comes not from suppressing a reaction you are still having, but from genuinely finding that the reaction does not have the authority it once had. That silence is profoundly disorienting to people who operate through provocation. Because they have nothing to work with, they pushed and nothing moved. They threw something and it passed through without landing, and without a reaction to analyze and refine and use as a map for the next approach, they are left alone with whatever they brought into the encounter, which is, almost always, something that had very little to do with you and everything to do with them. This is where the Stoic concept of what belongs to you becomes not just a philosophical principle, but a genuinely practical tool for navigating every difficult interaction in your daily life. Because the moment you stop treating other people's behavior as your territory to manage, the moment you genuinely release the responsibility for what they think and feel and decide about you, the entire landscape of what is stressful changes. What used to feel like a problem you needed to solve becomes something you can simply observe. What used to feel like a threat that required defense becomes something that is happening over there, in someone else's experience, with only as much access to your internal world as you decide to allow it. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from the other approach. And it is worth describing it specifically because many people are living inside it without quite recognizing it as a single, coherent experience. It is the exhaustion of constantly managing how you are perceived, of adjusting what you say and how you say it based on how it might be interpreted, of following up statements with qualifications and qualifications with clarifications, of re-entering conversations that are already over to make sure the version of you that exists in someone else's mind accurately reflects the version of you that you know yourself to be, of explaining yourself to people who had already reached their conclusion before you started speaking. That exhaustion is real and it is chronic, and it compounds over time. And the thing that makes it particularly draining is that it is fundamentally unwinnable. Because you are trying to control something that is not yours to control. Perception is not made of facts. It is made of the entire internal world of the person doing the perceiving. Their prior experiences, their current emotional state, their own needs and fears, and the particular story they need the world to be telling at this moment. Your explanation enters that environment and gets processed through all of those filters, and the output is not necessarily more accurate. It is sometimes simply a new version of the same conclusion, rebuilt from the new material you have provided. This does not mean communication is pointless. Real communication between two people who are both genuinely trying to understand something more clearly is one of the most valuable things two human beings can do together. But there is a specific skill involved in recognizing when that is what is happening and when something else entirely is happening under the same surface appearance. When the other person is actually open to new information, and when they are simply waiting for you to finish so they can return to the position they arrived with. When the explanation will genuinely serve understanding, and when it will simply give the pattern more material to refine itself against. Learning to feel the difference between those two situations before you start speaking is one of the most liberating skills you can develop. Because once you can feel it, you stop entering the second kind. And stopping that single habit frees up more energy than most people realize they were spending until they experience what life feels like when the spending stops. The Stoics had a specific concept for this that sits underneath all the practical advice about silence and non-reaction. They called it indifference to externals, not emotional coldness, not detachment from the people and experiences that genuinely matter, but a specific, practiced refusal to place your well-being in the hands of things that are outside your control. Your peace is not something that other people hold and can choose to give or withhold. It is something that exists inside your own territory, inside the boundary of what actually belongs to you, and it is available to you regardless of what happens outside that boundary, as long as you stop treating what happens outside it as a crisis that requires your ongoing management. Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea constantly throughout his private journals, writing to himself, reminding himself, correcting himself when he drifted from it. He wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events, and that realizing this is where strength comes from. He wrote to himself to confine himself to the present. He reminded himself that the things others do are on them, not on him, and that his job was not to manage the behavior of an empire from the inside of his own psychology, but to govern the one territory that was actually his own mind, his own choices, his own consistency with the principles he had decided to live by. What is striking about reading his journals is how frequently he had to remind himself of these things. This was not a man for whom inner peace was a natural resting state. He was governing the most powerful empire in the world, dealing with wars and plagues and betrayals and the deaths of children and the endless complexity of holding an enormous human structure together through an accumulation of daily decisions. He was provoked constantly. He was wronged. He was misrepresented. He had every conceivable external reason to be reactive, to defend himself, to explain himself, to let what was being done around him, and to him determine what happened inside him. And he kept returning, in the privacy of his own writing, to the same discipline. The discipline of locating his peace inside himself, where it could not be taken. Of treating the external world as the place where his actions happened rather than the place where his identity was determined. Of understanding, in each fresh provocation, that his response was his to give or withhold, and that the giving of it was a decision he was making, not a consequence he was being forced into. That is not a destination he arrived at. It was a practice he returned to, every day, in the small moments and the large ones, in the conversations that went well and the ones that went terribly, in the private hours and the public performances. He returned to it again and again because the world kept offering reasons to leave it, and staying required the ongoing, active choice to remain. There is a dimension to all of this that goes beyond the individual moments of provocation or explanation, beyond the single instance of choosing not to react or choosing not to step into a cycle that was designed to pull you in. It is the cumulative dimension, the way that these small individual choices, made consistently over time, begin to change not just your behavior in isolated moments, but the actual texture of your daily experience, the weight of things, the duration of things, the number of situations that register as crises versus the number that register as simply things that are happening. Most people, if you ask them, will describe their inner life as louder than they would like it to be, more reactive than they feel they should be at this point in their lives, more easily disturbed by things they can see in their calmer moments were never worth the disturbance. There is a background noise to their experience that they have grown so accustomed to they barely notice it anymore. The constant low-level monitoring of how they are being perceived, the ongoing assessment of whether various situations require intervention. The rehearsal of things they want to say, the replay of things that were already said, the anticipation of things that might be said, all of it running more or less continuously underneath the surface of whatever they are officially doing. That noise has a cost. It is not a dramatic cost in any single moment, but it is constant. And constant costs, however small in isolation, add up over time to something significant. They add up to a kind of chronic depletion, a background tiredness that is not fully explained by how much you slept or how hard you worked, a sense of being somehow behind in a race you cannot quite identify but cannot quite get ahead in, a feeling that your attention is never quite fully where it needs to be because some portion of it is always somewhere else, managing something, monitoring something, preparing for something. The practice we have been exploring throughout this video, the practice of genuinely releasing your grip on what happens in other people's minds, of allowing the loop to remain uncompleted, of returning to your own territory rather than living in everyone else's, that practice does not just change your behavior in the moments it is directly applied. It quiets the background noise, because most of that noise is generated by the ongoing project of managing what cannot be managed. The monitoring and the rehearsing and the replaying are all in service of the belief that your peace depends on controlling something that was never yours to control. When that belief begins to genuinely loosen through experience rather than just through understanding, the noise that was generated in service of it begins to reduce. And the reduction of that noise creates something that is difficult to describe to someone who has not experienced it, but instantly recognizable to anyone who has. There is simply more space, more of you available for the moment you are actually in, more of your attention accessible to the thing directly in front of you rather than the 10 things surrounding it. More capacity for the genuine presence that real connection, real work, real engagement with your own life requires. The things that matter get more of you, and the things that were never worth your energy stop receiving the portion of you they had been taking. This is what the Stoics meant by living according to nature. Not living simply in an austere, physical sense, though Crates and others of his school took that quite literally. living in alignment with what human beings are actually built for, which is not the constant management of perception and the perpetual defense of identity against imagined threats. It is engaged, present, purposeful participation in the actual moments of an actual life, the conversations that matter, the work that reflects something real about who you are, the relationships where both people are genuinely present to each other, the quiet moments of being inside your own experience without the intermediary layer of wondering how that experience is registering from outside. That quality of presence is not something you can manufacture. It is what remains when the noise reduces enough for it to become accessible. And the noise reduces through the practice, through the returning, through the patient, consistent, unglamorous daily work of choosing your territory and staying inside it. You are not different from Marcus Aurelius in this regard. You are not less capable of this practice or less deserving of the peace it produces. What you are is perhaps less practiced in returning to it, which is simply a matter of time and of deciding that the returning is worth the effort. And the decision is yours to make in a very immediate sense. Not eventually, not when circumstances improve or life becomes less complicated, or the particular people who have been testing your composure decide to behave differently. Now, in the actual conditions of your actual life, because the conditions of your life are never going to reach a level of cooperation where this practice becomes easy. The world will always offer reasons to react. It will always present situations that feel like they deserve an explanation. It will always contain people who know, with or without consciously intending to, exactly where to press to produce the familiar response. The question is not whether those invitations will keep arriving. They will. The question is who you are going to be when they do. And who you are when they do is built very slowly and very incrementally in all the moments between the tests, in the daily choosing of your territory, in the daily releasing of what is not yours, in the daily return, however brief, to the stillness that does not depend on external conditions to exist. That stillness, genuinely inhabited rather than performed, is what the walk communicated. Krates was not performing calm. He was not suppressing a reaction that was still happening underneath the surface. He was genuinely, from the inside, already back in his own territory before the man had finished speaking, already returned to whatever was worth his attention, already operating from a place where the man's words were accurately assessed as belonging to the man's experience and nobody else's. That is what is possible, not as an ideal to aspire to from a distance, but as a lived reality built through the ordinary practice of ordinary days. Every time something pushes on you and you choose not to react automatically, you are practicing the return. Every time you feel the pull to explain yourself to someone who is not genuinely asking a question, and you let the moment pass without stepping into it, you are practicing the return. Every time a loop presents itself, waiting for your participation to run, and you simply do not participate, you are practicing the return. And each return, however small, however unwitnessed, however unlikely it is to produce any visible external change in the moment, is building something real inside you. What it is building is not calm as a feeling. Feelings fluctuate. Feelings depend on sleep and blood sugar and the accumulated weight of how the day has gone. What it is building is something more structural than feeling. a different relationship with your own inner state, one where your stability does not depend on the external world cooperating, where your sense of yourself is not a fragile thing that requires constant protection from every misrepresentation, where the people and situations around you have whatever access to your internal world that you decide to give them, and no more. That is not indifference, that is sovereignty. And it is built in exactly the unglamorous, quiet, daily way that everything real is built. Not in the dramatic moments, in the unremarkable ones. The ones where the old pattern invites itself back and you simply do not follow it. The ones where the explanation is already forming in your mind and you feel it forming and let it dissolve without giving it voice. The ones where the loop opens and you observe it opening and allow it to close, again without your participation. Those moments do not feel significant while they are happening. That is what makes them easy to underestimate. But they are accumulating, every single one. And what they are accumulating into is the version of you that moves through the agora the way Crates moved through it. Not performing composure, not suppressing a reaction that is still happening, genuinely, structurally, from the inside out, no longer available to be moved by things that never deserved the movement. There is one more thing worth examining before we close, and it is the deepest layer of all of this, deeper than reactions, deeper than explanations. It is the question of what you believe your identity is built on, because underneath every reactive pattern, underneath every urgent explanation, underneath every compulsive engagement with provocations that you know in your calmer moments do not deserve your energy, there is a belief. The belief that your sense of who you are needs something from outside itself to remain stable. That if you do not react, you are accepting the thing that triggered the reaction as true. That if you do not explain, the misunderstanding will define you. That if you do not engage, you are disappearing. That belief is the root, and it is false. But it is false in a way that cannot be resolved by simply knowing it is false. It can only be resolved through experience, through the accumulated evidence of moments where you did not react and the world did not end, where you did not explain and your sense of yourself remained intact, where you did not engage and the situation resolved itself or simply lost its urgency and drifted away, where your identity, left without the constant external maintenance you had been giving it, turned out to be completely fine, more than fine, quieter, more settled, more authentically yours than it had ever been when you were constantly performing and adjusting and defending it. That experience is built through practice, through the returning, through the small daily decisions that nobody witnesses and that produce no visible external results in the moment, but that are changing, gradually and permanently, the architecture of your internal world. The man in the agora called after Crates as he walked away. More words, louder, searching for the reaction that had not arrived. Crates did not turn around. Not because he was suppressing the urge to turn around, because he was already somewhere else in his mind, already returned to whatever he had been thinking about before the interruption arrived. Already back in his own territory, where the man's words had no jurisdiction. That is the destination, not the absence of feeling, not the performance of unbotherability. The genuine internal reality of a person who has done enough work on the boundary between their territory and everything else that most of what used to feel urgent simply no longer does. That person is already inside you. It is not something you are building from nothing. It is something you are uncovering by removing what was never supposed to be there. Every automatic reaction that you begin to examine, every unnecessary explanation that you allow to dissolve before you give it voice, every loop that you decline to complete, all of that is removal. All of that is the slow, quiet uncovering of a version of yourself that is grounded in something that cannot be moved by someone else's need to move it. The crowd dispersed. The man eventually stopped, and Krates was already somewhere else entirely. That can be you. Not someday. In the next moment that pushes on you. In the next provocation that shows up expecting a reaction you have not decided to give. In the next explanation that begins to form in your mind and that you recognize, this time as something you do not owe anyone. Just walk. If this video reached something real in you today, hit the like button right now and share it with someone who needs to hear this. You know exactly who came to mind just now. Subscribe to the Stoic Truth if you are not already part of this community. Every single week, we come back here and go deeper together. The next video is already on your screen. Nobody remembered the insult. Everyone remembered the walk. Yours is waiting.